Yeah. Play that.
Wow.
I'll buy you multiple months of subscription so you can tinker around. You want a super?
Alright, so I'll just stop developing DropShock and
We should all just go to Eve.
I would say the first decade of Eve was basically a spreadsheet on steroids.
It still is. It's still. Oh.
Yeah, but I mean, it have gotten a little bit better since when it launched.
Yeah. You remember somebody made a Shockwave Flash Eve simulator, and you had this little ship that you flew out to an asteroid, and it spent 36 seconds mining the asteroid, and then you had to fly it back to the base. And after doing that 50 times, you could buy a cruiser, and that was it.
It's a lot.
Yeah, it's like the. Have you heard of the Penn and Teller game, where you just drive a bus? It's called Desert Bus Experience, and basically, it's literally you drive a bus for like 8 hours, and it's supposed to simulate driving from Tucson, Arizona to Las Vegas at 45 miles per hour.
Yeah, I'm all set on that.
And the bus will naturally drift to one side of the road or the other, so you cannot like walk away from the game. You have to sit there for all 8 hours.
No thanks.
All right, should we talk some DropShock?
That would be awesome. So PK is going to record. I will type up notes. Are we gonna start? There's some stuff that isn't in the suggestions thread that we said we would go over. Would it make sense to start with the suggestions thread, knock that out, and then go to that?
I've got kind of a list I'm gonna run through, and I can share this afterwards.
Yeah.
So if we kind of stick to this, at least you'll have. Then I can provide a template of kind of where I was sort of going. I don't know how well we'll stick to this, but we can try.
No, I think that's great, and it'll make my job a little easier.
Excellent. All right, let me organize it really quick. And there were a couple new posts on Reddit. Actually, there's one that catches my eye that I'm responding to that really resonates with kind of where I like to take the game, and it's how is the game more approachable for people who are casual, can kind of drop in, play a game, drop. And maybe like a 20-30 minute time movement. I think 30-second turns went a long way towards enabling that behavior. I've got a couple other ideas that I think can speed the game loop. So the current logic to reveal. So when you deploy to a planet, the planet is divided into, you've got a square, right? A unit can hold one square. Well, a square can hold one unit. Let's say this correctly. And if you look at a map has 10 squares, and you've got a little outline around every 10 squares. Everybody with me so far?
Yeah.
Okay. This is boring, but I'm going to try to make it relevant here quickly. So a 10 by 10 grid, the game calls that a sector. And the game then glues 3 sectors together and calls that a quadrant. And the game really thinks of planets in terms of quadrants. When it's building the planet and when it's trying to create events for you and things for you to do, basically like Bandit, Shack, Swarms, things like that, it's thinking in quadrant terms. The reason I did that was when I initially coded it, I wanted to create space between you and the next thing you were going to be attacking or fighting. If it was an NPC, so whenever you moved into a new quadrant, that would trigger something else happening. And that created a lot of space. The problem is there's a lot of movement it takes when you have to move, because you have to move in a 30 by 30 box to go from quadrant to quadrant. And so there's downtime, especially when you're taking a minute per turn, and you've got to move. Even if you're moving at 10, that's 3 minutes if you're at one side of a quadrant to get to the other side.
One interesting side effect of that is that whether people understood that explicitly or implicitly, it has spawned ways of playing the game, i.e. using a dragging base and scoping out the quadrants to cause spawning, that perhaps was not the original way that leveling crews or pairing crews was envisioned.
it wasn't meant to be dead air. I was just finishing. Like,
You're fine.
I started doing like 3 things at once, and it just means that it sounds like I'm not paying attention every other like 3 minutes because I'm actually finishing up something else I'm working on. Yeah, so a lot of the game's meta has revolved around these mechanics, and I think we can change the mechanics and just make the meta more interesting. I think it's not really compelling to drop to a planet and just find the edge of 4 quadrants and just have your unit do a little lap around that over and over and over again so you can trigger the bandit spawn code. That is an optimal way to play the game is really kind of disheartening to me.
Yeah.
There's larger fixes for that, but I think the core one is changing the spawning logic so that instead of spawning by quadrant, it spawns by sector. And the cool thing there is bandits are going to be on top of you really fast because you're going to look the second you look at a sector, the game considers that for spawning. Currently the game does that for quadrants. If you're able to see a quadrant, it goes in and runs its check to see if it should spawn a bandit in that quadrant. I'm going to take that logic and I'm going to move it down to the sector level. What that means is the spawn rate is going to have to be tuned a bit because it's built for larger movement spaces, but it's going to mean you're going to have a lot more to do. You should have a lot more to do as you're moving around because you should have a lot fewer of these dead spaces as you're going from spot to spot to spot. The other cool offshoot is you could spawn multiple groups of bandits simultaneously. So right now, the bandit spawns in the middle of the quadrant, and there's all this dead space around them. By moving to sector spawns, suddenly you could look at 3 new sectors, and each one could contain a group of bandits. So you could overwhelm yourself if you're moving too quickly through a map, depending on the map spawn rates.
So I like it, because if you move in the middle of a new quadrant, you could actually hit 5 spawns, which would give you a significantly higher kill rate.
Yeah, you could basically surround yourself if the spawning chances worked in your favor or not in your favor.
Depends on how you look at it.
Yeah. Okay, so that was just as I'm just kind of as promised going through the Reddit threads first, but yeah, this one's on top and it's completely in line with where I'm trying to take the game. So it's nice to see that. It was always the game kind of was, I think, sort of just it was built more for fun in a way, and then it evolved based on in ways I think very vocal. It's hard to build a game when you've got people that play it all the time and not really try to build it for them, right? Because they play it the most. They feel the most passionate about it. And so it's very easy to fall into a mindset of, oh, well, I'm just going to make a game for the people that absolutely love my game. The problem is you really alienate the people that are trying to get into your game and maybe the people who like your game, but they like other games and they want to be able to play your game a little bit and they want to be able to play other games a little bit too. They don't want to have to marry your game in order to quote unquote enjoy it.
So I think that's actually quite astute. We were talking about EVE Online earlier, and there's been a lot that's happened to that game's meta that has contributed to its decline. But I think that if people want to, kind of rationally approach and trace the decline of that game and its player-based numbers, going back to when they first started having company-sponsored and hosted events and eventually a player council, what happened is that the input from players became too significant, and it came to the point where people realized that they could effectively lobby CCP to get certain things changed. And what happened is the majority of changes, impacted and revolved that 1% of players that were responsible for, 99% of spending in news stories, the Pareto principle in extreme. And so for a short period of time, it actually worked quite well because you had these outrageous stories about people losing $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 worth of units, and that attracted people who wanted to see what kind of game could be that serious. But then in the long run, they realized that the ramp up to get to that point was so long and so time sensitive that nobody wanted to actually commit to doing so. and the decisions taken by the developers exacerbated that because they focused so much on specific changes to the meta and in-game content that they just made that ramp longer and longer. And so I think that any dev that is willing to step back from what they're hearing commentary-wise from people who've been playing for, a decade or longer and think objectively about what can help new players come to the game, I think that that's going to have a huge value add for the health of the game, in addition to any like player joining targets or things like that the developer might have.
Yeah. I feel like looking at kind of the traffic in DropShock for the last month, kind of since I've started tuning things up, we're not getting new signups. We're getting quite a surprising number of people who are coming back who played the game years and years ago. And maybe someone told them that, hey, there's things happening on DropShock again, or just for whatever reason, it's been in the back of their head and they log in every couple of years just to see what's going on. We've had quite a few of those, and that's one of the reasons I added a quick notification so you guys could see when one of these kind of people who hasn't been on for months and months hops back in the game. And I think that's our current new user, is somebody who played DropShock in the early 2010s and now is swinging back by because it looks like a brand new site and they're just curious what happened.
Well, and I would argue that if you could be successful in hooking those type of players, that might organically lead to down the road new people joining because they want to involve friends and family with their new passion. I think from talking to new players or people who appear to be new players, I think there's only one legitimate new sign up that I know of in the past couple months. But I think that there's a lot to be proud of and excited about with the increase and sustained increase from people who hadn't thought about the game in 5 or 10 years.
There's a lot I want to do for new players. I've done some quick patches because the new player, especially when all the planets went away, the new player experience went to hell. It was already like making accounts and looking at what was offered new players. The way the game's economy and mechanics worked really didn't lend itself to being nice to new players. So that's completely changed. New players start with a ton of command. So you used to start with like 100 command, no ore, a couple units, and effectively, when you deployed and when you lost everything, you had nothing to do. You were dead in the water. I'm pretty sure there was some way to re-request some starting units, and it was like a half-assed sort of, hey, here's a maybe way to get back in the game, but really the game kicked you in the knees, punched you in the gut, and then left you for dead. And I remember seeing a lot of people, and the ones I'm sure a lot of people quit, and some of them posted on the forum and said hey, this sucks, this is no fun. And I was definitely deaf to how bad the problem was. I know I did try to put a couple patches in there, but I have been thinking more about how to really show someone how much fun you can have in Tiny Wars DropShock. And I think so starting out, you get ore, you get a really fair amount of ore, and you get 1,000 command. So you've got a lot to do out of the gate. The starting units, there's some new mechs in there as well. There's a lot more crews. There's more mods. So right from the get-go, you can build an army the way you want. You can bring in a lot of units or a few units. If you take some losses, you should be okay. And the next thing I want to do after that is the 2 starting factions. I'm going to give them all of the simple constructs, the units and the mods, and I'm going to make them all shared. So as a starting player, you can build everything that's simple. So you can really start oh, I want to customize these units, and then you construction, and you're like, wow, look at all these things I can build. I can build this, and then I can stick it in this unit. And I think that starts the spark of what makes DropShock interesting, is being able to say, hey, I want to make this unit faster, and you go find an engine and you build it and you put it in the unit. You're like, I did that. I wanted to make this unit different, and I did it.
Frizz, can I throw something kind of radical out there from talking to the one player that I think is legitimately new? So their comments to me were that they felt extremely, extremely limited by what they could actually do when dropping units. Because I think that the meta has advanced so much that when you're a brand new player and you're constantly running out of ammo or constantly waiting on recharge, and bandits seem, frankly, fairly strong compared to what you're dropping. And the XP that you're getting is very minimal compared to what people are able to get on their planets. You feel like you're never going to catch up. What I was thinking, and I understand that this might seem a little silly on the face of it, is maybe actually starting new players at like level 10 and allowing them to pick some commands after the first or second time they've dropped that pertain to the playing style that they might be interested in. Maybe not open the LPs up to them immediately, but I think that that would provide a chance for them to actually get into the game and see how commands and abilities can kind of smooth that difficulty curve going forward. And I know that it's kind of crazy to just say, well, we'll just forget about the level 1 through 9 experience, but I do think that it could help substantially, actually.
I hear what you're saying, but I think we could accomplish the same thing just by tuning bandits down.
So I get that, and I agree with that. So, but when I hear their complaints, and I've heard this from other players, I think that it's also like an element of having things that you as a player can have control over rather than things that the game control. I think it's an element of agency, if that makes sense. And I'm not saying my solution is the one to get that player agency back, but people definitely want to feel like they have some level of control over their fate.
Well, I think we could also accomplish this if we tune bandits down and speed the leveling process from 1 to 10. So basically, in like 2-3 deploys, you're approaching level 10 if you kind of find your feet and get some kills and everything else. I think we'd have the same effect. And on top of that, it would still slowly ease you into the experience because it's already so much. You look at the modify unit screen, and once you sort of wrap your head around all the ways you can change a unit, and then you go to the construction screen, and suddenly you can build everything. And then if you had to go to the headquarters screen and like, oh crap, now I have to pick like 20 commands that not that many, but you understand what I'm saying? Like you hit a critical mass at some point where it's just too much.
One thing I think makes the beginning off very difficult is you not only is your commander a rookie crew, but all of your crews are rookie. Right now, I don't know if you've changed this in the new player experience, but you start with some LP to begin with. I think if your commander was base elite, so that he at least started off being able to kill things and hit with a fairly decent consistency, that would take away some of the, oh my god, it took me 6 turns just to hit this bandit enough to kill him. And that would get rid of some of the grueling of beginning the game.
Yeah, no, I actually, so that's part, when I did a quick pass on the NPE, I gave a couple better crews in there, so you can bring down some heavier units that should make it easier for new players to actually kill things, because instead of all using simples, now I threw some intermediates in there as well. Actually, the Savage Marauder found new life as a newbie unit, so we'll see how that goes.
Just saw it yesterday, the Savage Marauders. I was like, oh, this is interesting.
Like, is this still in the game? Actually, so no, so we could, the theme in a weird way of this co-jam is going to be the Savage Marauder. Like, not overly, but it's got like there's subtext. And so before, I don't want to go too far down the new player road because I've been thinking about it a lot. We haven't had new players. If Drop Shock, suddenly had, there was a time 10 years ago where we had, 100 new signups a day was probably low. We're nowhere near that. We're 100 less than that. We're basically 0 new signups a day. We do have a lot of returning people, so that's why it's been kind of I've made a couple of like quick patches for new players, but in terms of really putting time and effort into really shaping that new player experience so that people really get a taste of Drop Shock, we don't have them. Like maybe we'll get one. I think we had one that signed up yesterday, but it was a guy who played in 2012 and he no longer had access to his email. So he made an account and started chatting with people, and then I just gave him his old account back. So yeah, I completely. I've been thinking a lot about all the cool things that could happen for new players to really show them how neat this game is. I think we actually need new players first. So I don't want to burn a ton of our time on this, but it's definitely something that's in the back of my head right now. So I'm going to transition to a couple of the things in Reddit. There's requests to make the event window in a pop-up like map chat. Yeah, totally makes sense. It actually should have been from the start. The event window is really useful. The way it appears when you're deployed is super unuseful. So that's a really easy fix. I like that. Making commands free, like that. I mean, yeah, I completely agree with that. If it wasn't a huge code change to go in and modify those values, I think it would happen faster. I'm trying to, but that resonates with me, and I agree with it. I've tried to make command more relevant, like the priority resupply runs on Rin now should actually be paying out that 1,000 command. So it should be really easy to log in, do a run. Oh, no problem. Get your 1,000 command, and hey, now you can have some fun today because you don't have to worry about command now.
So I think as far as the commands being free, I mean, I'm all for all of them being free, but I think the actual goal of what everybody's been talking about is getting green commands, whatever you cast on yourself or your allies, so your buff commands being free, and then all of your red commands still costing a command. So anything that you're going to attack with would still have a command cost.
I've been thinking more of moving the whole system into some kind of just limit, like you can only use this many commands per turn.
Well, there's already that.
And well, yeah, but probably not time based, but
no. You can only use. You start off with 2 commands at level 1, and then every 10 levels you can use 1 more command per turn.
Yeah. And just rely on that system instead of that system. Yeah, because it's a bunch of mechanics that got glued together. It's the limit system, and then the fact the command that orders, to use the term orders cost command.
But I mean, like every 10 levels you get 1 additional command you can cast per turn right now.
Right, and I guess per the suggestion, is maybe and we suffered from this a lot like 10 years ago, is having a mechanic and it kind of does a job, and then throwing another mechanic on top of it, and then suddenly you've got like 8 mechanics, and you've got to keep them all in your head as you're trying to do something. So I like the idea of removing command costs from orders, and then just relying on the current limit that you have based on the number of levels. Now, should the suggestion of limiting the number of offensive commands you can use, maybe. I think once we're in a world where command points aren't a factor when you're issuing an order, when you're casting an order, then it opens up to, okay, do we need to have offensive or defensive restrictions to the number of orders we can use?
Wouldn't it make sense to try the simple solution, making them free first, and see if it introduces any problems before going to the slightly more complex one?
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to attack that just by making command really easy to get. Like, if you get 1,000 command...
I'm agreeing with you. My point was that the decision to make them all free, I think, is simpler to implement and simpler to see the effects of before jumping into something that bifurcates them, and then it's a little bit more difficult to analyze what is causing what.
Yeah, I'm still really kind of thinking about that, because I feel like the command system is there, but there's nothing really compelling about it, right? It's more like when you play an MMO and you get abilities, and you have like the set of abilities that's really good, or you have like a attack ability that's really good. So you go into combat and you're just pushing the button for your special ability whenever it goes off cooldown. Like, that's not a super compelling mechanic. It's fun to level it up, but when you're actually using it, so the gaining of that ability is really fun. The use of that ability is not compelling at all. And it's fun the first couple times you do it because it's novel, but that novelty wears off very, very quickly. I really enjoyed Hearthstone's like dungeon run mechanics, where it's the PvE events. You have a starting deck, and then every boss you defeat, you're getting a card. Slay the Spire also, you've got an entire game built around this mechanic where you have a deck and you're thinning the deck and improving cards in the deck and improving the deck, and you're kind of making decisions based on the hand you have at any given moment to try to turn like that instance in combat your way. I would really love the idea, and this would be a ton of code, but of more that your orders become a deck available to you, and every turn you actually only have certain ones you can use. So you can bring more orders with you, but you're making your deck less consistent, and so you might have a really so as a result, it's harder for you to respond to threats because yes, you threw all these really powerful commands into your deck, let's call it, but now you don't know consistently what you're going to get turn to turn. So it's harder for you to maybe issue a move order to a unit because you just didn't draw that order this turn.
I would have to hard pass.
And this is really, I mean, I played a lot of games and really liked mechanics, and I tried to see how they would fit into Drop Shock. So this is just me. This is me completely brainstorming.
No, I personal point of view, hard pass on that idea.
Yeah. So I don't want to distract from the order you're trying to go in, but one of the things you said there did kind of resonate with me. There was a suggestion that I posted in the thread that was brainstormed by probably 7 or 8 people. And I put a large number of suggestions for ways it could be implemented. None of those are serious or being asked to be put in, but there was one thing that people have said is they've got useless items piling up. And so the idea was, well, what could we do to make use of those useless items? And maybe there's some way to implement into the Ren runs, getting rid of them and adding a new feature. And something you said there was having mechanics that would be fun to use. And so I think that there is a desire amongst a large number of people to have kind of mid-game or in-game content where you could customize units to be a little bit more versatile, or customize crews while they're on units to be a little bit more versatile in ways that don't necessarily buff or nerf them, but allow for more gameplay opportunities. And so that was kind of the idea there, that, you know, you gain a bonus, but also gain a negative. But what it would do would be it would open up the game to a lot more ways to be played. And so the suggestion there wasn't necessarily implement this exactly as suggested. It's more like maybe we can kill a couple birds with one stone by, you know, creating some more content that factors into the story that you're currently building, and to also allow people to continue to customize the crews and or units they have in a deeper, more meaningful way that allows people to explore other kinds of playing styles without making them needlessly powerful or needlessly weak, if that makes sense.
Sorry, I want to actually go back to kind of to Peace's comment about how this definitely doesn't appeal to him. I'm not talking about like bolting the mechanic in as is. I think the interesting part of that type of game is there's an emergent aspect, to steal that word, of while you're in the midst of playing something happens and it causes you to reevaluate how you look at something as simple as combat. So,
well, I mean, I don't think that like the randomness in available commands would contribute to the enjoyment of battle. Like right now you have the distance of your commander as a contributing factor, the range of certain commands, the availability based on cooldowns, the availability based on your level. I think as far as command spam and having it available, there's already a lot of factors that contribute to whether or not you can or can't use something in the game.
Right. No, and that's not the mechanic I'm speaking of. So, like, I don't know, I like card games, so I like the idea of decks and draws and hands and everything else. I played Netrunner for quite a bit and really enjoyed that. I don't think, I'm with you in that I don't think it fits very well with how Dropshock was built and how people play the game, because it's very, the whole tactical strategy planning. Something's like, hey, be very tactical and very strategic. Oh, when you're in the game, you don't know what you're going to get. It's going to be completely random. Those two don't mesh at all. But I think what is usable in in that. And what is interesting and compelling is, like, let's say you're at a planet, right? And you're fighting bandits, and then suddenly you reveal one square, and it's not a bandit. It's actually it's a neutral group. It's a neutral unit, and it's got a little like almost dialogue bit to it. So your commander's talking to this guy like over the radio. So when you click on him, you get a little dialogue pop up, and basically it's sort of a set of choices that can give you an immediate reward. Like maybe he says like, hey, I saw a battle to the north. I can give you a map to a strange unit I saw buried in the sand. So maybe if you choose that, then it's gonna put a piece of loot for you in the next sector.
If that's what you were referring to by like the random pulling of cards, then yeah, that sounds perfect. That kind of goes the Reddit suggestion I had, the merchant.
Right.
Need more like PvE randomness aspect of like, okay, here's an event, a mission, a quest that you can go on or do this thing, and it happens.
Yeah, well, so now to bring the whole thing home, another option he could offer is, I also while I was wandering this desert, came across these encrypted orders. I'm not able to make heads or tails of them. I'll trade them to you for 1,000 ore. And if you do the trade, maybe it generates a command for you that is only effective. You can only use it while you're deployed, and maybe it has limited uses or something. But maybe it's a more powerful version of a regular command. So it's like a shield buff, but maybe it's double power.
No, I'm all for that. That sounds interesting. I thought you were referring to your actual like pool of available commands being less available.
Right. Well, that's the so there are really two mechanics there, right? I was just envisioning the entire thing bolted into drop shock, and then I was dropping out the parts that were kind of that didn't fit, and then trying to preserve like, okay, what is really interesting about the mechanic. So I think that the real thing that makes games like Slay the Spire interesting is that choice that leads you to change your strategy. But there's nothing random about the choice. Like you're saying, I'm going to choose this over this because strategically this gives me loot or this buffs my combat ability for the rest of the deployment.
Just one suggestion for that then is, if you added like a random event for something to where you got like one of your commands swapped out or a new command temporarily, some of them maybe, depending on what they did, would actually have like an hour time frame that you can use that command. Because let's say I'm down on Ren and a Beast, and I happen to get this command that does something, it could be completely useless to me for that entire, cycle of 5,000 turns or whatever it happens to be left in the cycle. Or if I'm down a Kanu and I kill something and I'm like, oh awesome, I have upload terrain level 2 available to me in my drag base. That's maybe a time frame that something's available so you could redeploy and make use of this new ability.
Oh, okay. So that's a cool idea. So maybe make it bankable. Like you get this command, but you can say, okay, I want to use this in my deployment right now. Or if like maybe you're in the middle, you're doing like
like an activate later option.
Yeah, you can just say, I want to bank this, and then when you go to deploy, you can say, I want to take this extra command with me when I go down to deployment, and I know it only has so many uses, and I know it's going to poof on me after deployment, but I'm going to take this little upgrade.
Yeah. I think that'd be like a more functional way of doing it anyways, because you could end up being somewhere like randomly deployed with an SE or just doing something random and come across something that's good, and then you just have completely no use for it for that cycle.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, that would be a nice iteration on that feature. And it's good to hear that like that core mechanic, I think would really add a lot to the game and would make deployments more interesting because then you're chasing. It's not just combat. Then suddenly there are neutral NPCs that you can interact with, and maybe you could have an interaction that turns them hostile or even turns them friendly. Like maybe they join your deployment for the orbit of the planet.
Yeah, there could be a dialogue to where if you pick the wrong option, they're like, oh, you think that way, huh? Well, I'm going to attack you then.
Yeah, it could even be something. I mean, I've always wondered how to get playable shack in the game. This could finally be it, where maybe you've got a merchant that found like that has these trained Shakar, and he's willing to sell them to you. But it turns out they're not loyal; they'll just stick around for the deployment of the planet. But now you have like a Shakar that is going to join your army for one deployment.
Want to buy queens?
Queen, there's a lot. A player running around with a queen would probably be.
As long as I'm the only one with it, it's fine.
Yeah, I think it's what everybody's mentality is.
Like I say, it'd be really fun for one cycle to just nuke the crap out of people.
Frizz, would it be possible at some point to see how big a queen actually is? Because if you look at the unit, we literally only see like the top portion of the queen, and so in my mind, it's like, have you ever seen the movie Tremors? So like the graboid from Tremors is actually a huge long worm, and the queen looks like there must be significantly more under the ground.
That was the intent. That was really a limitation of what I could do with the map generator. And I saw it in chat the other day. Like, it would be really cool to have units that were like different random sizes, like a 1x2 or a 2x2 or something that took up like significant space. I'd love to have that. I think that makes some really interesting gameplay. It also changes the space in your head about like relative size of things. So, but that's the issue with that, and actually that's led me to like what I've been working the last pretty much coming up on a week now on the map viewer code, because in order to do anything with it, it has to be completely rewritten. There was somebody I think it was XHunter was talking about the process turn code had code smell. The process turn code is a dream to work on compared to the map viewer code. The map viewer code is this Frankenstein of PHP and JavaScript and CSS, and it for I don't know how that thing didn't fall over, but I somehow all the major bugs got squashed in that, and it just works, and it actually works really well. The problem is if you want to do anything else with it, it eats up so much time because it's all arrays pointing to custom functions that are buried in other files. Everything is done circa 2005 HTML, so your browser checking, and it wasn't. It's just bad. It's so bad. I've spent a week on this, and I'm right back where I started. Now, granted, things are event driven now, and like properties live in actual units, and it's actually fun to work with. But I'm slightly burned out because I've sprinted in place for the last week just to get the map viewer code actually to a place where you can work on it, where you can do new things with it. So yeah, don't just the process turn code until you spend a little bit of time with the map viewer code. Let's see here. Let's touch on CE limits, and then I think that'll lead into a conversation also about base balances as well. How's everyone feeling about CE limits?
So I'd say on the whole, there was some initial shock amongst the players, at least in my faction, but I think we're getting used to it. I think we feel like on the whole, we have a little bit more, I guess, diversity in units would be the way I would put it, that are being deployed. So we like that. I think the only concern that we really have is that it has really significantly increased the importance of the number of players that you have in your faction or alliance or in a group dropping against a specific thing. And so it's actually vitally increased having the importance of having a given number of people on at a certain period of time. I don't know the solution to that is, looking more at PvP windows, or the solution to that is also considering maybe some kind of cap on CE drop per faction or something. I don't want it to be done in such a way that it penalizes people for wanting to play the game and wanting to drop, because I think that'd be a negative. But that's really, I'd say, the only side effect that has been a little bit concerning. PK, would you agree with that? Because I know we discussed that previously.
I definitely think it does affect more, how many people are online right now at this moment than it used to. The answer, I agree, there's not really a good answer. I think the limiting maybe Planet CE by a certain factor, or Depending on how many people from the same faction are deployed, there's a modifier for the next person, like a 1.1 CE or something like that, to where you can't deploy as much because there's so many deployed already. I don't know that that's a good answer either.
Yeah, I think that complicates things.
It complicates things, but it also adds a little more strategy into what everybody's going to bring. I don't know the good answer yet.
Yeah, I think ultimately what we certainly don't want to do is do anything that punishes people for wanting to play the game and drop.
Exactly.
And we don't want to punish people for successfully coming together and organizing, dropping together. That's not fair to them. But at the same time, it has definitely changed the meta of combat such that the number of individual droppers is significantly more important than it had been previously.
Yeah, and that's a trap we fell into the first time around. Was it kind of, oh well, let's limit the number of people in a faction that can deploy. Let's create all these tiered lists of CE deploy amounts. And I think if you're new and coming into a game and suddenly it's like, hey, welcome to Drop Shock. Here's 20 pages of fine print in terms of all the little things you can and can't do. It's wrong. Like, it doesn't from a game, from any kind of standpoint, from the outside looking in, it doesn't feel right. Like, it just feels like such a band-aid on a larger issue. So I liked kind of how the mechanics of Kanu shook out, sort of providing a bonus in the loot chance for people who were dropping lower, and also the intent of the planet was more. It's not mass PvP. Like, you're going there to get ore. You're going there to level up. Maybe level crew is probably Rin for that, but you're going, or if you're doing like a big drag base, and then your payoff at the end is you get to loot all these wrecks and try to get transmissions. So it like that played really well to kind of other mechanics, and I think people know, like, they'll go out and someone has a big score on Kanu and they get all the messages, and people are interested, like, oh hey, you landed finally your attuned sentry, cool. So Dominus and Hades are in a much rougher state. Those planets need to become one planet. So PvP window, shack, territories all in one place. And once those pieces are in there, then it becomes like a mass PvP, PvE planet. So depending on time of day, you're just doing PvE stuff. And I think that's where the shack really will be able to shine, is because you might decide, oh, we're going to have a big attack on this faction, tomorrow, but then a giant Shakar base shows up, and well, now you've got to deal with that. So go ahead.
What I like about that, Frizz, is that it could force 2 or 3 factions that would be fighting against each other in that PvP window later to actually team up and work together against a PvP threat in the interim. And so I think you would get more planet activity with not necessarily all the activity having to contribute to destructive PvP. I think that would be a really good middle ground that could potentially make a lot of people happy.
Awesome. Yeah, because right now the planet is just, well, drop your large army and hope somebody else drops a large army so you can smash the two together. And okay, yeah, I mean, we saw today, like, or this week, there were almost 2,000 player units destroyed in one day on Dominus. And that was really cool. I got some screenshots of the fighting. It looked like a lot of fun. And I think that is something that Drop Shock has to offer that you'll be hard pressed to find something like that. So
I have to arguably say that just like the endless PvP timeframes made that a lot less fun than it could have been, because there was a lot of people that would have much rather have left like 2 or 3 hours into all that than just to like have to stay there to get the salvage or lose everything altogether.
Yep. Oh well, and that actually leads to the really big thing I want to talk about. And we're actually through my other points, so we're setting this up pretty nicely. So big retune on Dominus and Hades is probably next, because the process turn code, the Bandit Spawn piece, I'm in the middle of reworking and I just stopped because I think it's contingent on it's kind of ties for also fixing Dominus and Hades. Probably need to do the spawn code first, and then I'll have all the pieces I need to really do a good pass on Dominus and Hades. I can see about putting a PvP window on Dominus in now as sort of a band-aid on that. Would that ease the bleeding on that planet and make it so people weren't dying for 2 hours?
I mean, I don't want to go back to it at all right now, so I mean, I'll let everybody else kind of voice their opinions, but I'm pretty well done with Dominus until there's a PvP window.
Yeah. Hey, I'm sorry, left, Karen.
No.
I think PvP windows create a problem of salvage. So the biggest pain with Mortem, which I find far outweighs the pain with Dominus at the moment, is 5 p.m. happens and then everyone drops 100 hermits and it's just a weird grab. My suggestion would be a way to incentivize a goal incentivize a series of actions across the cycle which accumulate towards an end cycle goal. So it's not 3 minutes before payout, cap them down to 40, give them a rib shot, and it's more, I need to do this every 3 to 5 hours, and our faction need to work toward this to get this goal at the end, and then this thing. So potentially it could be the amount of unknown processed at the end of the cycle gets you this reward. Then looking for unknown, and you can either do an NAP, which we did last cycle. We had a truce for the whole cycle, and then this one we're aggressively hunting for it and fighting each other. So I don't think a window works because we'll soon complain about 1,000 units dying and everyone dropping hermits, because it's just not. That's going to be a way bigger problem.
Can I just add something to that? Basically, one way around the salvaging issue would be that with Dominus, you've got your checkpoints or your nodes. If there was a PvP window, maybe once the PvP window's closed, you can only salvage stuff inside your node areas.
I love that idea. So your territory dictates what you can salvage. So then the fight's for the territory, which is what Frizz originally wanted, rather than the salvage.
I'm definitely down with something like that. I don't think like the PvP window being over and okay, let's drop 100 salvagers is actually so much of an issue. I mean, we all got so tired the other day that we all agreed to just call it and decided terms to get our salvage. Like, that's how bad it got. So I don't think fighting over the salvage is so much of an issue. We can come to some sort of terms afterwards if we're really irritated, but just having like 24 hours of unlimited PvP is daunting and irritating.
I love the idea of a PvP window with the territory is you actually own that. And because suddenly, like, if the window's closing, you've got pushed back, you want to try to like take that node so that you have that breathing room to salvage when the PvP window closes. So suddenly the territory becomes incredibly meaningful.
Yes, they become very valuable. I like that idea as well. But just like endless PvP, I don't want to ever look at the planet or any large endless cycle faction planet again without there being PvP windows after like dealing with it. It's so unenjoyable.
I didn't mind it, but that's entirely fair. I think me and PK spoke before everyone else jumped on, and we said there was a lot of emotions in that long fight. I mean, if it wasn't for the CE limits, I think that would have been 4,000 to 6,000 units dropped. I think the only reason that it wasn't a monumental amount is just due to the cap, and people were redropping 4, 5, 6, 7 times, whereas before they'd be dropping 2 to 3 times. But yeah, I definitely think something needs to be adjusted, but I don't think, as long as we don't copy and paste the Mortem PvP hours, because we're just going to have the issues magnified that come with Mortem. I just think as long as we have a different workaround, I think it'll work.
I think there should be like altering PvP hours. Right now it's set up to every 600 turns, so if it just processed it that way now to where like, within an hour or within 30 minutes of a payout window, nodes are locked, everything's locked, PvP stops, then it starts again, say in 6 hours, then that gives you a lot of alternating patterns. But I agree, just having, the AM, PM kind of screws with one time zone or the other. I think it should have like 6-hour windows on and off or something like that, to where it's a little more frequent, but not as long maybe. or to where like every 8 hours there was a 2-hour window, so that there's more windows but less length of the time.
I quite like it because then what it will do is, say you have a 4, 6, 8 hour window. The first 2 hours is kill the person that's got the territory, push them off, and then the last hour is kind of, okay, we need to dig in, get some supply, and wait and decide if we need to pull back. What are we willing to? What we're gonna take? So I think it's more like than just throwing in EXP trading effectively, and then just going right and rushing for it.
Yeah, I agree. That's basically what it breaks down to. Is we spent 6 hours killing as many units as we could until we all got so frustrated and tired that we decided, okay, we don't want to do this anymore. Let's draw the line and cut the salvage. So I mean, in a sense, yeah, we just basically experience traded or salvage traded for the 6 straight hours, which after the first 2, it was not enjoyable.
Well, should it be tighter then? Because if a battle starts hour 1 of a 6-hour window, you're doing the same thing. Somebody has got to fight then those 6 hours.
Well, I think there should be like 8 hours downtime and then 2 hours or 3 hours on, and within 30 minutes of a payout window, it locks.
I think everyone might be able to jump in because there's a lot of people in here to comment. But I would say a base attack with a defender. I mean, we did a base attack today and it was washed out in 90 minutes. If they'd have had more earlier, that'd have turned into 2.5, 3 hour fight. And that's generally, if you don't get a defender, if you get a defender, it's going to be an hour to an hour and a half, and they're willing to stay till the end. So I think we need to bear in mind an attack that's not successful, someone pushing back, and then maybe a second wave. You've kind of got to look at. I'd say you needed 5 hours with Mortem was the right amount to give you time to kind of fight.
It was 4. That was. I agree. 4 was good.
4. Sorry, apologies. Yeah.
All right. So 4 hours. 4 hours of PvP, 1 hour downtime, and then run it back.
I would say much more downtime. That's a lot of having to watch a planet. That's the issue. Is right now you have to like pay attention to the planet 24 hours a day.
So what are our thoughts on reducing the cycle? So then potentially it's not, I've done all this work and built this territory command, but I know when I go to sleep I'm going to lose it. It's more of every cycle, every PvP window there's a blank canvas. So maybe the territory pays out and then resets at the end of every PvP.
Well, if we did like 4-hour PvP windows, and payouts are currently every 10 hours, we could do 6 hours off, 4 hours on, 6 hours on, 4 hours off. I mean, 4 on, 6 off. And that would go along with a 600-turn payout system now without you having to necessarily be there all the time. If you wanted to spend the extra command to undeploy bases or undeploy things in between, that's, that would be optional to you. You'd be leaving your everything, unguarded, unprotected, but you don't have to necessarily sit down there and be undeployed watching Dominus. Oh my god, did somebody drop? Oh my god, did somebody drop? And just not playing the game, or sitting AFK on Dominus for 12 to 20 hours going, okay, well, are they going to drop now? Is this ever going to happen? Gosh, I'd really like to be training a crew or leveling my commander or getting ore or doing anything else.
So I like the reset idea too. After when a new PvP window starts, it starts clean. That way that you're kind of defining your territory as you go. You're not, because otherwise I worry it's going to kind of go back to just static, like a static battlefront. Especially if we make the control of the nodes more meaningful. Resetting them after every payout makes that initial claiming
makes
mechanic
it more active. Yeah, I like that.
Frizz, while you're thinking about that, going back to your question more broadly about the CE cap, something that was brought up a bunch this week, and while it would impact me quite significantly, I think it is right from a balance standpoint. Would you be open to giving the Kilrah mods a 1.25 CE modifier to start? Because right now they're rather inexpensive to drop compared to like a double I unit, and so given how much stronger they are, I think it gives them a pretty significant advantage. And while I understand that they should be a little bit more powerful given the context in which they sit in the game, I do think that starting at 1.25 for each of the mods, that would make a pretty big difference.
So yeah, when they were first went in, it was more, it was code that I could easily mod. I actually wrote that whole thing in one night. I couldn't sleep, so I just started at midnight, and I think I finished around 5:30 in the morning. and I had it wrapped up and ready to go. And it was just, let's make ridiculous units and let's have fun with it. So now that I still want a ridiculousness aspect to it, because I think they brought in to Drop Shock in a way that still fits the way we want to play the game. The idea of like a unique unit, that's something that's really cool, that's found, that's yours and you worked for. Because there's the construction element, which is kind of used to be, is always the way you kind of make stuff, and there's the excitement of like having an integration or finally getting the variants you want. But the loot aspect of Drop Shock was always kind of lacking. So I think one thing that Kilrah really brought in well was they added exciting loot, and also that having the Kilrah have it in the feed now, it gets other people interested and exciting. So it ticks so many boxes. Now that we've kind of got it, I agree that let's tune, especially with the CE limits, like everything else in this game, like there are so many little mechanics working along that things have to kind of be nudged here or there. What about maybe like a 1.1 on the Kilrah mods?
Well,
Because it's multiplicative. So if we go 1.25 across the board, that's 25% times 25%.
yes.
Right out.
Yeah, 1.55. Yeah.
I think 1.1 would still be pretty low for the. I mean, what they give is better than any mod in the game times 2.
Yeah, in Frizz, I'm saying this as someone who has a very significant amount of the sentries already, so this impacts me pretty dramatically. But I do think something a little bit higher than 1.1 would be called for.
So
Okay.
I definitely think, like, we actually talked about it several times throughout the week, and I suggested 1.3, 1.4. Kaylee suggested 1.5. And I think after like 10 to 20 of us all getting together at different points and talking it over, 1.25 was kind of the agreed upon median for being somewhat fair. Because a tuned BA, depending on your mod layout, takes 0 damage from all army units, and depending on how you play with that unit, it's incredibly powerful. Getting more than 10 of them to 20 of them to even with their low CE base, you can fit 30 of them in an army, and they will wipe out an army of Gats, no problem. Not even take a bit of damage from them. So they're really, really powerful at a 1.1 or their current 1.0.
Well, I would say that even almost any advanced unit that has mods integrated in them or Kilrah mods in them are incredibly powerful compared to regular tuned units that have no Kilrah mods in them. And they definitely, from a person that doesn't have a lot of them and has a lot of anxiety going into any army fight because they don't have anything that I look at an army like, oh, look at, there's BAs, there's sentries, and there's Lightfoots. They all got 2 extra mods than I can put on mine, and they're overpowered mods. So even if I have a 20 unit army advantage on them, I might just get walked over, and maybe I don't, this is a different thing, but I don't have the time, whatever. That gets into different avenues, and maybe I could buy them. Again, that's another avenue, but it does create a lot of misimbalance between the normal units and what people do for armies compared to what people can have on a normal.
So Dog and I had a chat about this as well, and we, rather than changing the CE, I didn't actually suggest this to Dog, but from what we spoke about, I had the other idea, is the Kilrah take up 2 mod slots, so you can only add 2 normal mods on, and then that creates, they are effectively 4 mods, so then that allows you to add 2 more. That was just my simple fix.
I would rather have a very high CE modifier than that. Not from a power standpoint, but I don't like taking away customizability or creativity with the mod layout.
Yeah, and okay, this is let me see. So the Kilrah change, it's in. All Kilrah mods are now 1.25. That code is pushed. We can see how that plays out. Also, because of the way the Kilrah mods work is integrated, I'm still feeling it out. Future units may just have like 1 Kilrah mod, but it might be a really, really good mod, because with the way this is kind of built, I can create a mod specific to a unit, lock it in that unit, and really make that unit more interesting, like the Death Groundhogs. So it seems like there's obviously this mechanic's really interesting. It adds some really cool loot, and we can kind of find the edges around like what's the best way to make something really OP in the game that still that doesn't make army fights boring. Where this guy brought all the Kilrah units, so he's gonna win.
One last question about the Kilrah mods. So I understand thematically why they are elite. Dog brought up a good point that as a result of that, they make the simple units that have them extremely high in CE, and they probably should be much higher than regular units in CE. I'm not sure we should go as far as making them a simple mod, but maybe there's a medium ground where they're advanced or intermediate. Because
is there a way to make them not have a multiplier based on complexity?
Yeah, what it's hitting is that way back within like the first couple months of Tiny Wars coming out, people realized early on that if you took a very simple unit and loaded it up with the best mods, you could drop something super cheap, and it just walked all over the advanced units, Scatlingers, what have you.
No, my Pumas with Derringers didn't kill Ballistas with no problem.
It's because you're bad, BK.
So the Death Groundhog was an ode to those days, and that's where that code comes from in terms of complexity. I just made him elite because I wanted the Kilrah stuff to stand out. It has obviously implications for how it adjusts the CE calculations. I'm going to leave it just for the moment. It is making those calculations more complicated, but I just tuned up the Kilrah numbers. If I go in and fix that, it's going to take all those complexities back down, and I'm going to undo the change that I just did.
Yeah, that's understandable.
So this has actually led to a code change on the spot. I want to give this a week to kind of brew and see where it goes. And this leads to the last thing that I wanted, and this actually, like the conversation here actually led to another change to the last thing I want to talk about today. And this gets to something that Darkleth hit earlier this week from the code jam last week, where we changed the 3 commander specializations and we moved Auto-Salvage to Army of 1. And just follows in the numbers. I buffed it a little bit because why not? But it turns out I had basically put the game in a state where you could get 100% Auto-Salvage. And when that was pointed to me, it brought back all the reason Auto-Salvage went in the first place, which was this huge. A bunch of people quit and people are upset because basically Drop Shock is a game where you spend all this time, you build these huge armies, and then you got to fight with them. And when you fight with them, you lose your armies. Somebody's going to win, somebody's going to lose. If somebody wins big, that means somebody has lost big.
Yeah.
And somebody's going to quit. And that we had a lot of people quit, and Auto-Salvage was the Band-Aid to like, okay, if you're really worried about losing all this time you've invested in building these units, slap some Auto-Salvage on there, and at least you have a chance of getting it back. But it always felt really, there was a problem there, and the solution felt glued in. So I actually spent a lot of time this week thinking about Auto-Salvage and its place in the game, because I feel like in order for this game to be successful, I think someone said it in chat, like, if you lose a battle and you get kicked in the nuts, you're not going to want to come back. You're not. Like, why would you? Why would you play a game that takes your investment of time so flippantly? It's cool to win, but I think taking everything away from somebody and knowing that they quit the game from it, most of us don't want to play games that do that. Like, I want to win and maybe have some trophy of that, but I don't want to win the game in such a way that I've made somebody quit. Because, someday I'm going to be in that. The game eventually is going to have 2 people, and one person is going to beat the other, and that guy's going to quit, and then it's going to be a game for one person. So with all of that as the prelude, this is what I settled on this week, thinking over this whole thing and kind of tuning it as I went. I'm going to run through how I see this entire feature working, and then I'm going to open it up for feedback. So here we go. For semantics, Auto-Salvage, as it's called, is now going to be called Self-Salvage. It just, that way it speaks. So and this is really also to educate new people to the game. That way, auto-salvage doesn't make a lot of sense. It sounds like a car part. So self-salvage hopefully is a bit more explanatory, like the unit salvages itself. So units that self-salvage now drop a wreck. The reason they drop a wreck is that wreck contains all of the non-integrated mods that were on that unit. You get your unit back, but it no longer has any mods on it, aside from integrated. There's a cost for that, don't worry about that. So when you get the unit back, it is damaged. That you can't deploy with it right away. You have to go into probably modify units, it'll say damaged instead of like reserve or active, and you're going to have to pay an ore cost to undamage the unit to repair it. Down the road, there'll probably also be a delivery time where your damaged units, there's some service that's going out and getting them for you, and it's going to be so many hours or whatever until you get your units back. But there's more code to do that. I want to get the core feature in first. So right now, you lose a unit, it self-salvages. The mods are on the field. Somebody can go get them, maybe the guy who killed you, but you get your unit back. You just have to spend a little bit of ore to make it active again. Now, here's how self-salvage is going to work. All units, every unit in the game, gets an inherent 35% chance to self-salvage out of the box. So when you deploy, without anything else, you're going to get, and you get your army entirely wiped, you're going to get a third of your army back every time. The 85% cap is still in place, but the numbers are going to be tuned down to get that cap. The Preserver mod will give 20%. The Survivor pod will get 10%. Survivor is going to be renamed to like a reinforced cockpit. That way you don't have two escape pods in the same mech. That just seems weird. Let's see here. Army of One is going to give 10%. And then the merit Warhero is currently giving 10%. The problem is Warhero also gives a really hefty CE bonus, so it's kind of become the merit of choice. The self-salvage bonus is going to be removed from Warhero and moved to Battlefield Promotion, which is kind of a dead merit right now. And so Battlefield Promotion will give the last 10% you need if you want to hit your 85% cap on self-salvage.
So, what about a new merit instead? Because Battlefield Promotion is used for commander units and is already considered like a rare merit to get. It's like 1 in 20 of every other merit.
Can I answer?
Yeah.
Oh, I can change. So okay, and then Battlefield Promotion can become. Is there a problem with making Battlefield Promotion in the regular pool? Then I didn't realize it had a.
Active Master and BP both have special ratios. I would rather see new merit, personally, because even if we added it in as its own merit now, there's going to be very limited amount of them in circulation. I think if you added a new merit to it, it would make a new economy item.
Okay, well let's.
Or we can actually move that
Battlefield Promotion flag. Hold on one second, XHunter. Does Battlefield Promotion have a place in? Is it when you get Battlefield Promotion? Is it like, yes, I need this, or is it I don't need this merit anymore? Because it seems like once you have your set for commander units, it's kind of a throwaway merit, right? I don't think anybody here.
Once you have like 10 to 15 of them, depending on what the merits are, that's pretty much all you need.
Okay, so I'm going to put Battlefield Promotion in the regular pool, and I'm going to add this addition to it.
Okay.
Because I feel like if those units are already special on top of that, like those high-end units that you have to pilot, that's kind of the rarity already. I don't think I feel this feels like another mechanic that got slapped in just to make those units harder to use and to obtain. So I'm going to put BP in the regular pool, and with that I'll move the 10%.
Kirby, no, he's taking the 10% SS off of Warhero completely.
Yeah.
Frizz, just to don't disagree with your decision. Why are you against adding a new merit, or are you not? You just think you've already got your mind and decision set on that. Because I'm fine with it, but where do you sit with that? Just so you could explain, so we can.
A new merit that just has self-salvage doesn't feel very compelling. It feels like this stuff got changed around and then like a little extra content got thrown in. I want all the merits to feel exciting when you get them, and I feel like Battlefield promotion right now, when you get it, if you have the full set, if you have all your guys outfitted to to pilot all of your commander level units, it's like, well, I didn't need that. Now I've got to go find a power up to take it off. Like it's not interesting anymore. And on top of that, the Warhero became super compelling with the CE change. Like being able to take 20% off a unit CE, effectively that means that unit if you get 5 of those guys on the same unit, that means you're bringing 1 extra unit. Like just that CE power alone feels to me crazy powerful.
What about we just move it to quick reflex? That merit is kind of in a gray zone right now. It's not really that useful, and it makes sense that a quick reflex unit can maybe survive that situation better.
I mean, I kind of like that idea. I don't. I like. I mean, I honestly like the idea of Warhero being good. It's been just this kind of meh merit for so long, and now that CE limits matter. I mean, even with the Auto-Salvage before, it was a meh merit nobody really wanted, and then with CE limits, it finally came into like, oh, okay, oh my God, this is actually a useful merit.
So, XHunter, I want to address your point directly. The reason I want this in BP is I want you to build one of 2 ways, right? And I want you to kind of, when you go into battle, you're determining your own level for risk. The game's not going to try to dictate it to you. Like if you want to really build the highest end units with the best armor, best weapons, and you're willing to sacrifice, like you're going in saying, I am not going to die, right? You're accepting that baseline 35%, and you're saying, I don't need it though because I'm not going to die, right? But there are people who are risk adverse. There are people like Dark, like DL, who built an entire army trying to maximize his auto-salvage. And he really got bit with the stealth nerf I made, but that's an entirely. I've already hopefully posted 2 apology posts about that. And hopefully we can leave that be.
No, I was not or am not upset about that. Just so we're clear.
Right. So the reason I want to put it in BP is I want you to consciously build towards auto-salvage. I don't want you to get it for free. That's why all the mods. And aside from Army of One, Army of One, you're already taking a hit on CE. Like you are intentionally building a force that you are saying, I want a lot of insurance with this force. When I fight somebody, I have an 85% chance of getting my unit back. So already I can play more risky, I can push fights. And it's in some ways there is an inherent unfairness to somebody who doesn't have high auto-salvage, because when they fight you, they're basically fighting naked. Right? That's how current auto-salvage works. If you're fighting somebody with high auto-salvage, when they lose stuff, you have to kill effectively 10 of their units for every 1 you lose. And that's an incredibly hard balance to try to strike, where, my army has to be 1/10 as effective as your army in order for this math to make sense. And it's just never going to make sense. So instead, let's give everybody a baseline starting auto-salvage. Let's change it so that something drops when there's a kill. So there is some sense of loss, but it's a kick in the knees. It's not a kick in the nuts, right? And then if you want to maximize that chance, you're going to have to decrease the efficiency of your army, but not neuter it, because you're still putting something at risk, but you're not putting everything. You have a lot less of chance of putting everything at risk.
I like the everybody kind of getting a base auto-salvage. It's something I've thought about a long time with this game is, we had to add in the recall, the getting newbie units again when you started the game if you lost everything, because the odds of you losing everything and then just not being able to play is so high in this game that most games, you have a chance of losing stuff. You're not always losing everything. And that's something this game's kind of always been, is you're always losing everything if you don't win a fight. So I do like that.
For newbies, for the first 10 levels, I can not only, tell you what, I'll do that now. I'll, double the experience payout if you're a new player. It might already be in the game. I feel like that's something that was already added. But with these changes, newbies can also have an inherent auto-salvage for the first couple levels, so that you only have a 10% chance of losing a unit, or maybe it's 100% chance and everything comes back damaged as long as it's on a PvE planet. and then suddenly, as a new player, you can go out and get wiped and come back and just spend some ore, bring everything back up, and do it again.
Yeah, I like that idea.
Okay, but so when we have some newbies, that'll be a big concern. What about what's the feeling in terms of you guys and having?
I mean, I think it's fairly solid. I mean, I would rather the self-salvage, I guess we're calling it now, had stuck on Warhero, but I understand the rationale there. I think on the whole, having the ability to go into battle and not feel decimated after it that's a peace of mind that's well worth adding to the game, even if it, I guess in retrospect, or by comparison, somewhat nerfs those of us who are running full self-salvage armies. I think I'd rather have a healthy game than have a fully optimized, self-salvage strategy. Just my 2 cents.
I would almost like the self-salvage to be put in and then the merit not changed, and then we can change them both. We can A/B them over 2 weeks. But if the decision is to do one and then we feed back, I'm fine. Change is change. I think I'm at the stage now where I appreciate any change, and we can just be reactive with it, like the cat change, like the CE change. Chuck it in, and we can let you know.
I mean. Sorry, Slayer. I thought you were finished. All I was saying is I would agree with you. Like I think that I would prefer. We're already nerfing the mods. We're already giving a boost to people who don't run with the mods, keeping the rather minuscule 10% at this point to WH for now, and then seeing how it shakes out would have been my preference. But I'm not too fussed one way or the other.
I'm going to make the change, and if it really becomes a pain point, I'm happy to revisit it. But just thinking about, I really want this mechanic, and DL, you really got me thinking in this direction. I really want you to intentionally build towards this mechanic, and I feel like lumping it in with Warhero has just become like A++ tier for merits. To lump in also this other really nice mechanic with it flies in the face of that intentional building part that I want to design for the system.
Yeah, I get that. I think at the end of the day, though, if I'm looking at, okay, so let's say I've already got a Warhero crew, making that marginal decision to grab another merit for 10% AS is going to be very difficult to justify, principally because, let's say, if I give up a BZ merit, I'm probably not going to give up, 8 to 20 damage depending on the mod out, or trading controlled speed for it. There's very few scenarios I see in which going from 75 to 85 is going to be worth doing that, and I think that there should be some situation in which someone feels like that is worth it. I mean, obviously, I've been a proponent of AS for a long time. I think that, if you have a very risk-averse play style, it's an attractive way to play, as I do, because I generally don't get a lot of time on my turns, so I end up killing a lot more units than I think I probably would otherwise. But even for me, I think I would have a tough time justifying it. But I'm fine either way and seeing how it shakes out. Like, I would rather the game be healthy than me get a particular nerf to my playing, or nerf or buff to my plays.
I think it could maybe settle on nerfing the CE modifier of Warhero, and that would maybe balance out the auto-salvage percentage. That may be a little bit more.
No.
Yeah, you got with that, you've got too many moving levers. Really, if to have clean balance in the game, you want a action to have one effect. And here we have an action of the merit, and now suddenly it has impacts on 2 significant systems. And that was just the way things kind of shook out. My advice, let's put the merit discussion aside. My instinct is I want to see how it looks with it on BP. If it's hot garbage, I'm completely open to moving it around. and discussing that at a future code jam. But this is such a seismic shift for how we're going to play the game. I really want to just put the system in place and see and have you guys use it, and then we can have a conversation about, okay, this needs to be tuned because this blah blah blah. Like, we don't know what this is going to do because this is just such a enormous shift in mentality in terms of how we play the game.
The issue I would have with that is that change one beta pass, like the really OP stuff, will be very easy to brought up, but like the things that just a little bit too weak, underused, it's really hard to bring them back on the table and try to buff them back versus just finding the problem in stuff that's just too powerful.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I think that that'll just require all of us to try to be cognizant of that fact and try to maybe, focus on the unseen rather than the seen, and look at what we're deploying and what other people are deploying, and when we have these code jams, bring it up and say, hey Frizz, I've not seen XYZ unit deployed in a while, or I don't know anyone who's touching ABC mod. I think it just requires some persistence and some introspection from us to make sure that that doesn't happen. Because I don't know if there's any other way to achieve that end other than us being kind of vigilant about looking out for things that might just need a minor buff to be returned to play.
Yeah, no, it's tricky because that's actually something else I've been thinking about this week, is that there's sort of a walk sprint cadence to this. There's incremental changes, there's little walks we can take to tune a number here, tune a number there, get things that aren't quite where they should be, maybe they're underused, and just a little nudge in one direction changes them. And then there's things where we need to sprint, where we have to just charge into new territory, and this is one of those areas. So this is kind of the Kilrah mod, like CE change was our walk for this code jam, and the sprint is what I want to do immediately after this is go in. I'm pretty sure the auto-salvage, tune the numbers, changing auto-salvage so it drops a rec, taking your mods off is going to be a little tricky because nothing does that in the game right now, but it's pretty straightforward. And then the last piece that's hopefully not a giant headache is changing the modified unit screen so you can repair units. That's a huge headache, then I'll skip that part, but I really want that to kind of flush out the entire mechanic in one shot. If I can get that all done in a couple hours, I'm hoping to have this done by end of day today.
Frizz, just a quick thing that you said that actually moves to a potential suggestion without hijacking your list. So PK and I were talking, and we had a discussion surrounding crews dying and survival, and someone else brought up in the code jam tech speaks about, since power-ups have come into effect, crews dying are just non-existent. I didn't put it on Reddit, but I had a suggestion where there would be a cooldown where your crew has a certain amount of time where it needs to kind of revive itself, and you could have a power-up that then reduces that time, because it doesn't feel very, I'm not sure what the word is, but it doesn't feel very correct for a crew to die, the mecha to blow up, and then you can just redrop them again. Surely they need a little bit of time to kind of lick their wounds. I don't know what your thoughts are about that.
People without a lot of crew and new people a lot versus people who have like 2,000 crew and can just redrop whenever they want. So I would vote no for that.
Yeah, maybe a Reddit discussion on that one.
Yeah. Because this is, I don't want the game to punish you for playing it, and right now this is a very sharp edge on the game. This is something that really punishes you for playing the game. So I want to round this edge off, and I think if we really like these mechanics, then we can add depth to them by adding cooldowns on units and crews and things like that. But in terms of you kind of have a first pass on an application, and you're just trying to get in like the bare minimum of features to feel it out and really see if it makes sense. I want to get our core there, and if we like the core, we go forward with it. If we don't like the core, then we jettison it, and we can move in a different direction. It's not a huge waste of code and time.
Frizz, when we get done with this, could you shoot me a message in game listing the things of this that are going to be implemented now, so I can just differentiate that on the.
I'll send you my notes, and pretty much everything in the Auto-Salvage becomes Self-Salvage. There's a bunch of points under that, and the numbers that are changing. I'm going to try to do all that in the next couple hours.
Okay, sounds good.
Real quick, I sent to your actual email a RAR of the new Bandit building images, so that'll be available now to you.
Nice. Yeah, once I'm out from under all of the updates, like I need to make, especially the view turn, and I'm working on the spawning code. I absolutely want something you can spawn in Bandit Town with the new Bandit buildings and an actual compelling Bandit base with neat rewards hiding in it.
Yeah, just want to let you know. I went to your actual email, so you know where to look for it.
Thank you. Yeah, I know. Like Bandit Homeworld was kind of the lost feature. So maybe we won't get to the Bandit Homeworld, but we can have, I feel like, cool Bandit bases and have them laid out in a certain way so they don't recognize them visually. I think that could be really compelling and a fun mechanic.
Well, you can do like a little community event where we all submit a bunch of base designs for bandits and let that kind of be a thing.
I don't think. So that's the way the current code works. Is there all this stuff is hard coded and it pulls various units and designs and things like that. It's such a headache and it's not flexible and it doesn't evolve well. What I did with with Kanu was make it more scaling and make the game able to respond based on like how far it is in the cycle, how many signals there are. That felt really strong and seemed to play well. So what I'll probably do is just teach the game how to build a base, and then sit back and tell it, okay, build me a base with eight buildings. Cool. Okay, now build me a base with like 50 buildings using that same kind of layout. If that doesn't work, then we'll go back to the old method. But in terms of being able to like scale the challenge and make it more interesting, being able to do it programmatically is becoming so much stronger than kind of adding. You know, to your point, if you guys want to create some design and say this would look cool, I could take that and say, okay, I like how that looks. How do I make that in terms of code? So I like the suggestion. Do it, but and then I would take that and then figure out a way to make that in code. Does that sound good?
I like it.
Yeah, Frizz, the only other thing I was gonna ask about is for the Bandit thing, would there be the possibility of using like a GAN or something where over time it starts to build bases a little bit better based on what people are dropping and what it is successful defending itself against and what it's unsuccessful?
Yeah, I've got so many ideas with the new spawn code I want to put in. And that's why I've got to rework it. Is the current code can't support anything like that. So I really want kind of a responsive system that gives you more of a challenge as you're able to beat it. But that's, I'm in the process of gutting the code so that I can put in pieces that can do that.
What kind of timeline do you think that code will take?
You say that again, Trapped?
Like, what kind of timeline do you feel that code will take? A week, 2 weeks?
The thing is, the process turn code, even though it looks awful, works really well for what it does. Because at its heart, it's all flags and associative arrays. So it's very easy to set up a state and track that state and modify it and respond to changes in state. Like, it doesn't look pretty, but it works perfectly well, and it's actually, once you wrap your head around it, and it took me like a week to get back into it, it's pretty easy to go in there and do what you want to do to it. The view map code, on the other hand, is a kludgy nightmare, and I've basically ripped out 75% of it. So that said, it's more what's coming before it. So right now, coming before the Bandit spawn code is, I'm doing this for the rest of today, the self-salvage. After that, I'm still pouring time into the view map rewrite. Once that's done, then it's a question of what's next on deck. There's the mass PvP issue, Dominus and Hades. But I feel like the spawn code needs to come before that, because in order for Dominus and Hades to be compelling, I needed to spawn Shakar in such a way that they respond to player conflict and and are able to challenge your interests when you want to do PvP, but the Shakar have other ideas. So it feels like Bandit Spawn is probably the spawning code is going to be next on deck once this map rewrite is done. But the map rewrite is taking a really long time.
Just a quick one, Frizz, regarding Dominus. Did you shadow reduce the building limit from 100 to 70? Just to make sure it's not a bug.
Yes, I shadow reduced the building limit.
Cool. Just because it still says out of 100, but you can only deploy 70. So I know that's just a minor visual change, but just so everyone knows.
Yeah. So I've implemented a bunch of game constants now. So it used to be all this stuff was hard coded and repeated over and over and over again, because that's what you do when you're learning PHP and writing a game. So I've moved that over to a game constants file. So now I can change one setting, and it swaps over all the code that relies on that setting. I just missed that line when I swapped the rest of the building code over to constants.
It's funny, I was just using constants earlier doing a Unity program.
They're awesome. It's the way to go when you're writing games. Or software, for that matter. It's the building deploy, you said the limit wasn't showing right?
So when you deploy limit, it says 70 out of 100, and then it just gives you an error that you can't deploy another building.
So maybe you need to clear your cache, because when I was building the base earlier, ours says out of 70. So that could just be something cached there, I don't know, but ours said out of 70 as of like the beginning of this cycle, or like when it got changed anyways.
I'll check it in a minute. That's fine.
Yeah, I'm showing it using the constant. There's actually 2 versions of that. Let me check the other file.
While Frizz is looking at that, do we have anything on the agenda that is next up?
Sorry, you got cut off there at the end.
Or is there anything while Frizz is looking at that? Is there anything? What's next on the agenda for us to look at? Because I know we spent a bunch of time on a couple of points. Is there anything else?
Well, so he didn't make clear whether or not he actually wanted to proceed through the entire suggestions list. I don't know what that noise was. If that is the next thing here, let me just quickly look at what we've discussed.
Yeah, I think he's responded to the top one, so I think you've probably had a scan through.
So we discussed the first one on the call. We did not discuss Kunj's request on the Death Dealer. That might be a quick one that we could discuss. We went through most of PK's list. One thing on PK's list I would like to discuss is the Firestorm LE change.
I think just all drones in general that are spawned, because like your HMM, you have the ability to drop like Oleo drones, Deuterius, and all those like individually.
I think that's a good quality of life change that we should have a chat about.
I think because like I said, you can drop the drones themselves like just as units, and then you can't tell the ones that are spawned from your HMM different from the ones that you deployed yourself. So I think all drones, whether it be the DSM, the Firestorm, HMM, any drone unit that's spawned should get a crew name affix and then just drone afterwards.
That's a bit more code than just kind of. I like that idea. But it's a respectable lift in terms of the impact. It's really just kind of a quality of life piece for people who use drones.
Sorry. I was just going to ask, is there medium level implementation we could do, knowing that would be the ultimate goal, some way to make that differentiation clear?
I'm going to take a look at the suggestion again.
Because I think the main thing is people want a quick way to differentiate what is a deployed versus something that's spun off from a unit. So it may be as simple as doing like a quick color change and some flavor text on the unit, which would separate it from the full. I mean, I think that the suggestion there and that implementation is the dream, right? But given the amount of time,
it would inherit the crew name that spawned it, and then it would add a one or drone or anything after it. So it would just inherit the property crew name, and then it would add drone to the crew name when it spawned the unit. I think it shouldn't be too difficult to code. I haven't like looked at the way the acti works for spawning a unit and how it like adds it into the map, but it should not be difficult. Keyword on emphasis on should.
Yeah. I mean, everything has like a quick hack you can do to it, but it's still time taken away. When I'm thinking about these quick changes, I'm trying to think of a future state and where I want that functionality to go. When it comes to spawn units, that feels in line with kind of a larger feature I want to do around NPC, like hireable NPC units that you can recruit while you're deployed.
This is the actis for like DSM spawning into Shadow Eye or Lone Eye, Firestorm spawning those.
Right, but it would be the same approach, right? It would be a unit that only exists over the course of your deployment.
Yes, you're right.
So I want to kind of sideline that because I feel like any hack that I put in now is wasted time because I've already kind of identified it for a system that I want to build a larger feature around. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. It was, I agree. It's a quality of life thing. It can get a little confusing using them sometimes. So, but if there's something maybe down the road that'll initiate it or resolve the issue or help with it, that's cool as well.
I think my quick fix actually introduced a bug. Hold on one sec. I think it's missing the constants file. There we go. Right. Okay. Dog. That text should now actually be the constant instead of just the constant. All right. We're just over an hour and a half. I want to get started on the new CE limit code. Maybe do a couple minutes of parting shots. Does anyone have anything they want to say as we're wrapping up?
With just a quick one. With the changes we've made over the last couple of weeks to commander trees, what are your thoughts on any other suggestions for specific trees, or do you want to let that simmer with self-salvage and the CE limits coming into effect, or are you interested in us giving you feedback to tweaking those?
Like reworking the dependencies and things like that?
Yeah, so for example, Task Force Commander having 1 to 0 task forces and small tweaks that don't necessarily just kind of moving the needle in different areas of existing code rather than adding new features.
I think with the CE change, that definitely gave more life to Task Force Commander and gave him some breathing room. So you're saying Task Force Commanders give him access to more task forces?
So that was just one community supported suggestion, just as an example to give you an implication.
More task force for everybody would be ideal.
I think so.
So just
the task forces really kind of came in with the commander specialization, and unfortunately married to them, just because they weren't really compelling out of the box. There wasn't a lot of meat there to give them, so it was really a game feature that got turned into a specialization based on the class. I fully support completely divorcing those two and just giving everybody 10 task forces, because
I vote that also, because I think like the main adding of task force was, I felt anyways at the time, it was more dependent on the community hard requesting the ability to have stack move, stack attack, and like just being able to control a group or a squad, as opposed to having to click every single unit all the time. It was more of a quality of life improvement. And then when it got added as only 1 to 4 groups or 1 to 7 groups, it was, well, that's cool, but I can't really break down my stack of 60 units enough for it to matter now.
Let me take a quick. Actually, let me. That's down in the view army code. Let me take a look at that really.
What's everyone's thoughts on how, rather than having everyone have the ability, potentially they're purchasable with commander points? Because I think as we're adding these new features, we need to look at a way that high-level players, which we all are, can spend their command points, not just on clones. So I think this could be a nice thing, rather than just giving everyone everything. Could be nice to maybe everyone starts with 4, and then you can buy 5 to 0.
I'm not.
Sorry, start with 1, 0 to 3.
No, I'd want to be able to buy all 10.
Sorry, yeah, you start with 0, 1, 2, 3, and then you can buy 4 to 9. That gives some form of mechanism to specialization, as well as something to spend level points on outside of clones.
Quality of life wise, I'd rather start off with 1, 2, 3, 4 and buy all the way up to 0. But either way,
yeah, semantics, left and right, it doesn't matter. It's just in terms of them being purchasable rather than everyone having 0.
I mean,
Yeah, I like that as kind of something down the road. We'll see. I think I can just modify 2 spots and give everybody 9 task force. That is there appeal to that?
There's 100% appeal.
I don't like it. I think it should be something you should unlock, and I think the thing. Well, I moved between TFC and SG, and a big USP for TFC is the improved commands, whereas for SG it's the fact that I can destack units, because if I'm stacked in a fight, I'm at a disadvantage. The key to having a stack of 6 or 5 when you're on a building is like a big strategy. I think giving that flat to AO1 and TFC takes the USP away from SG, because the SG's they have 2 big benefits. One is the CE, and second is the ability to destack units quickly. Yeah. I don't think everything should have that.
Oh. I disagree on that factor. I think everybody should equally be able to control squads of units. Just personally, I mean, I think that not having more stack commands or more task forces or more squad commands or more functionality in that is a very limiting factor for everybody in the game, and I think it's a big handicap.
Well, what kind of rising tide raises all boats? What if, so it's currently 2-4-7. What if we, as an interim, just went 4-6-9, kind of cap those out all the way? Would that still satisfy both camps? We can revisit in terms of what we want to do down the road.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy with there being more either way.
I think that's great, and then maybe we put a vote on Reddit straight away of the step 2, which we potentially suggested, of either having them ready, available, or having them purchasable, and then we can decide with this step 1 which kind of path we want to take. Because again, we just need to taste this for a week and see what this feels like. We feel like it's a good move. I still want people to work for the PvP, and knowing that there's a big benefit to destacking, and it should be given to you. It should be something that you should click hard for, because there's a big day. There's anyone that stacks in a fight, 9 times out of 10 gets destroyed. So that's a big strategy that shouldn't be given to you in a hotkey. That's my 2 cents. It's just one side of the coin.
I mean, I personally love watching people run to my base stacks. I mean, that's just food.
Yes, but I don't think we should hinder people's functionality of fighting or being able to control things.
Don't take the extra 10 minutes to unstack.
Well, I don't see that's the thing. We need to reduce the amount of time investment that this requires just to do basic things. We need to get more functionality for the basic things so we can get to the actual meat of the game. If you have to spend 10 minutes organizing your army because you don't have as many task forces as somebody, you're just screwing around. You're just wasting 10 minutes of your life. You're wasting 10 minutes of the only 1 or 2 hours some players might have to play. That's just a big F all of them.
Most people take like 3 times.
You go ahead, Hunter.
Sorry, X, we didn't hear you. You cut out very quickly halfway through your message. Can you repeat that?
It's just that organizing is a huge part of strategy. If you're not having the time to move things around and strategize, that's a penalty you have to take. You can't
wholeheartedly, yeah.
chaotic army and just expect it to perform as
So
much as something that just form into legions and such.
Yeah, part of the fight is the tactician of position and movement. The fight isn't physically shooting and not dying, and it's movement. It's what you drop to counter what you drop before, who you work with. I think there's huge elements, and giving that on a plate for speed, I think that's a step in the. There should be a way of speeding it up. I do agree, because if someone doesn't have high APM, it can be quite hard and individually targeted and stuff. But I do think that it shouldn't all be given in one. That's kind of where I sit. But I think we should vote. I mean, I don't think there's a wrong answer. I think the community thing to vote for it.
Yeah, I want to. So this one's got some depth to it. I'm going to hold off doing a quick change because also the reason these limits were in there in the first place was that it was a form of trying to put a cap on what you could deploy and trying to force people not to deploy 120 units. Well, surprise, people are still going to deploy 120 units even if they can't control 120 units. So it kind of fell on its face in that regard. But especially now that we've moved over to CE, the reason these numbers are lower doesn't apply anymore because you're thinking about different things when you put your army together. So I feel like this is a target for a change. But my instinct also says that just doing something on the fly right now is just going to make people upset. This feels like it needs a little bit of thought. So why don't we stew on this for a week and try and target it for the next Go Jam? Does that sound good?
Sounds good.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right, I've got some changes to make. DL, I'm going to send you my notes in terms of what I wanted to cover. Obviously, we went to other topics as well, but I'm really excited about changing Auto-Salvage to Self-Salvage, kind of, and changing from. I saw that in chat this week, and I thought that was perfect. Changing it from a kick in the nuts to a kick in the shins. And we'll see where it goes from there.
Cool.
Appreciate it.
All right, everybody, thanks for coming out.
Stay safe. Thanks, guys.
So before I end the recording, is there anything else anybody wants to kind of go over or discuss? Okay, gonna go ahead and end the recording now. May 23rd, 2020, Code Jam.